Hello everyone and welcome to round 7 of the 2020 Tata Steel Masters edition. It's former World Chess Champion Viswanathan Anand versus current World Chess Champion Magnus Carlsen, and it's quite the thriller of a game, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Without further ado, let's check it out. Viswanathan Anand opens with e4. So c5, as expected. Carlsen will most of the times go this as it goes within his World Chess Championship preparation. Knight f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to b5. Anand goes for the Rossolimo, and g6, fianchettoing the dark square bishop, also one of Carlsen's favorite defenses. We have castles by Anand, bishop to g7, and now c3, numbing the dark square bishop and also preparing d4. We have knight to f6, attacking e4, and before advancing the d-pawn, rook to e1, defending the e4 pawn. We have castles by Magnus, and now d4. So we have a6, and here bishop captures on c6 and bishop to f1 are known moves in the position. However, Anand goes for bishop to d3, and it is already as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So Carlsen strikes in the center. We have d5 and now e5, and here Carlsen spent over 20 minutes on this move, probably deciding whether to go knight to e4 or knight to e8. In the end, he decided for knight to e8, and Anand decided, okay, now it's time to grab pawns. D captures on c5. So if he can consolidate, if he can play b4, keep the structure, then it's a solid pawn. So bishop to g4, Magnus immediately goes for one of the defenders of the e4 pawn. If he can eliminate it, he can win back the pawn. So bishop back to e2, and here you have to decide whether you want to capture right away or maybe not. Here the problem is if you capture here, then bishop captures, knight captures on e5, you allow queen captures on d5, so you haven't really won anything back. Knight to d3 now, attacking the rook, and here you would see rook d1, queen captures on d5, bishop captures, and now knight captures on c5, winning back the pawn. So the material is equal, and it's pretty much everything is traded down. So instead, Magnus goes for knight to c7. Before going for this, adding one more defender to the d5 pawn. And here you could go bishop to f4 to further defend the e5 pawn, but then knight e6 goes after the bishop and the doubled c pawn, so you either go back and you lose this pawn, or you go to e3 and then you lose this pawn. So instead, Anand chooses the best defense, defense of the pawn, knight bd2. Now you simply have no means of removing one of the defenders, and everything works nicely now. So what can you do? Here Magnus goes a5. He prevents b4. He doesn't want White to cement his pawn on c5, and now h3. Asking, do you want to capture? Then I'm just going to capture back with the knight, and all is well. So Magnus goes back. We have bishop back to c8, and now bishop back to d3, opening up the rook's defense of the e5 pawn. Also possible was bishop to f1. For some reason, the engine prefers it, probably as the bishop on d3 blocks the queen's influence on the d file, but who knows. I always say those engines are tricky bastards. So knight back to e6 by Carlsen, and now comes knight to b3. The c5 pawn is attacked, so he just defends it with knight to b3. And now Magnus pushes a4, again removes the defender of the c5 pawn, knight bd4, and here Magnus grabs the pawn back. Knight captures on c5, and now bishop to c2. So again, the material is equal, and now it's time to figure out whether this e5 pawn is a weakness or a strength. So queen to a5 by Magnus. Developing the queen, still have to decide what to do with the bishop here. We have bishop to d2. Now putting the bishop in front of the queen, and rook to d8, defending against c4 with a tactic. If c4 now, then you can move the queen, and the d5 pawn is protected. But you could go further with this knight b5, kick the queen back. Queen b6 now. Now if captures, then queen can capture on b5, but still c captures on d5, queen captures on b5, captures here, and it's again everything traded down. Not much to go here on. And also, after this rook to d8 move, you could try b4 right away, but then again everything just gets traded off. This captures, you can capture with the knight, knight captures, bishop captures, and this is also one of the possibilities. But before that, Anand goes queen to c1. So what happens now? Magnus goes back, knight to e6, he doesn't want b4 now to come an attack against both the queen and the knight, but Anand pushes it either way. So b4, and here if you play a captures on b4 en passant, then everything just gets straight. Knight captures with an attack on the queen, b captures, a captures, captures, captures. You can go for even more captures, 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 and now going after the e5 pawn with f6, captures, captures, and you get this position. Again, completely equal material, pretty much equalish. So Carlsen not interested in that. He goes back, queen to c7. Prefers to keep the tension. Now comes knight captures on c6, b captures, and bishop to e3 now. Grabbing hold of the dark squares, and c5 now. You don't want to keep this backwards pawn there. So c5, b captures, knight captures, and the queen to a3 by Anand, going after the knight on c5. Knight back to e6, and now rook a to b1. And Anand played this fairly quickly, as black doesn't really have any threats against the pawn here, and even if you could win a pawn, you almost never want to give up your dark square bishop, because you just create a lot of dark square weaknesses around the black king. But here it doesn't even win a pawn. After captures, captures, and captures, you lose the e7 pawn. And okay, queen captures on c3, but now bishop to h6 is very strong. So again, you will feel the holes left behind around the black king. Of course, you cannot capture because of queen f6 followed by mate. Of course, mate will be possible because the rook captures knight, and so on. So after this, rook a b1, d4 by Carlsen. So what do you play here? We have knight captures on d4, and now again, what do you play here? Well, Magnus played bishop captures on e5. The problem with knight captures on d4 and bishop captures on d4 is that you cannot give up the rook for two bishops. If you could, that'd be great, but you can't, because if captures, captures, and captures, now you have a winning move for Anand. Even pause the video and try to find this winning move in a position that never actually happened. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. It's a beautiful move. You have to use the whole board to find it. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, first queen to f3. Queen to f3 with an attack on the rook. Force the rook to move. This is if you thought about the rook to c1 first, that doesn't work. You first have to kick away the rook from the defense of the bishop, because here you cannot go rook b8 and you cannot defend the rook. So you have to move the rook. Let's say rook a7, and now this is completely winning. If you move the queen, you lose the bishop, so you can play queen f5, but here is the threat, rook to b8. And there is no good move here. Anand would just win here. If captures, then captures with check. You have to give up more material, captures here. And, well, after the king moves, and now you just end the variation with white being up a whole rook. Unfortunately for black, this is not possible. Bishop captures on e5 is played, and now knight to b5 by Anand. You could go for knight captures here, but Anand prefers to keep the tension, and he wants to keep his advantage going. He's up a pawn after all, so he wants to make it happen. The only problem for Anand is this is only move 27, and Anand is on 11 moves. 11 minutes on the clock, whereas Magnus has something over 50 minutes on the clock. So okay, the queen is under attack, queen to c6, and then now comes rook to b4. Rook to b4, this is a move played with the idea that he wants to play bishop to e4, attack the queen, and win material. However, there was a slightly more precise way to do this. Bishop to h6 is even better, because you already threaten bishop to e4 now, because the rook guards it, and also there's the threat of rook captures on e5. So to avoid this, you can't go back with the bishop because of just bishop to e4. So you have to play bishop to d6, attack white's queen, and then queen b2, and well, the game continues, but with a lot more pressure from white. Bishop to e4 still a threat, and it's a very nice position for white. But okay, Anand went for rook to b4 instead. It also comes with a double threat, bishop to e4, and also just winning the a4 pawn. So here Magnus goes bishop to b7. Now he invites bishop to e4, which Anand does. We have queen to d7, bishop captures on b7, queen captures, and now rook captures on a4. So Anand grabs a pawn, and now he's going to well, try and nurture it to become something more. And clockwise, Anand is now on 8 minutes on the clock, whereas Magnus is somewhere around 44 minutes. So bishop to f4, and it's a very good idea, since if the bishop is captured, knight captures runs into some problems, because you cannot capture the knight, the queen would hang, and also there is mate threatened here, so it would be very unpleasant if f3, queen d5, again with threats of queen d2 followed by queen g2 mate. Here black would definitely be better. So here Anand just trades, we have rook captures, and the queen to b3. Magnus captures on e3, bishop captures, rook captures, and now knight to f4 with the threat of checkmate. So what do you play here? Anand goes rook to f3, and it is the best decision, better than making holes in front of the white king. So rook f3, basically paralyzing the knight, since the f7 pawn falls if you move the knight. We have queen to e4 now by Magnus, and then now king to h2, not allowing any checks along the back rank. And here it's move 36, Anand is below 5 minutes on the clock. And now g5 is the move, well, the engines prefer, just keeping that knight there and, start bringing the other pieces into the game. However, Magnus goes for knight to d5 instead. So what happens now? We have c4. Okay, you cannot push a4 since both the rook and the queen guard the a pawn, but you can start pushing the c pawn, which is what Anand does. We have queen to e5 check, provoking more weaknesses. We have g3, and now knight back to f6. We have a3, and now comes knight back to e4. So again, what do you do here? We have queen to c2, now adding another defender to the f2 pawn, and also supporting the c pawn. Now you will start pushing it. And here f5 is definitely a possibility, again, if you want to cement that knight on e4 and then see where to take it from there. Magnus decides for knight to g5 instead. We have rook to e3, pushing the queen back, queen to c5, and now h4. Pushing the knight back, of course, knight to e6, and now queen e2. Again, defending the c4 pawn. You cannot move the knight because of rook captures on e7. So what can Carlsen play? We have rook to c8, going after the c4 pawn, and now rook c3, just defending. And here h5 by Carlsen. Forgot to mention, we have already reached time control, so Anand is no longer under pressure. King to g2, and now king to f8 by Magnus. We have queen to e4, and now king back to g8. Here Magnus just has to wait and see what Anand will come up with. Queen to d5. Here Anand offers a queen trade, but Magnus, of course, is not interested just yet. Queen to b6, and now a4. The a4 pawn starts marching forward. We have queen to a6, going after the a4 pawn, and here we have a very interesting position. So even pause the video here and try to find what would you play with white here, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who found it, congratulations on being an excellent strategical tactician. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, Anand played c5 here. He gave up the a4 pawn to start pushing his c pawn, but the rook to e3 was really, really awesome here. Point being that if you capture the pawn now, then you just lose to rook captures on e6. F captures, queen captures with check, king has to move, queen captures on c8, you're up a piece, your passed pawn is defended, and everything works out. And if you don't go for the a4 pawn, then by rook to e3 you have just, you've successfully defended the pawn while always keeping this an option. The problem is black cannot go rook c5. If rook c5, trying to kick the queen away, again, capture knight, and you've removed the defender of the rook while threatening to capture the queen. So if rook captures here, again you capture here and you're up a knight. And even if you don't, if you try rook d8, it's still the same thing, just remove the defender of the rook. So rook to e3 is a very powerful move, which should have been played. But okay, it's also a possible idea. c5. We have queen captures on a4, and now c6. The pawn is marching forward. We have rook to d8, now pushing the queen back, and now queen to c4, offering a queen trade. We have queen captures on c4, rook captures on c4, and now rook to b8, attacking the knight, provoking c7. Anand, of course, pushes c7. We have rook to c8, and now once again, feel free to pause the video. And what would you play here? Just a nice question. So for those of you who have found the move I'm just going to show you, you have superhuman strength. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, Anand played rook to c1. And it was in this position that the players agreed to a draw. However, there was a move that could have made a lot of things possible, and that's rook to b4. So congratulations to everyone if you found it. Point is that rook to b4 packs a lot of poison to it because it prevents black from activating any of the pieces. The rook, you cannot move the rook. The knight, well, you kind of need the knight to guard the pawn. The straightforward threat of just captures, you just play rook c4 and you're going to win the exchange. Either you lose the knight or you capture here and capture here with check, and this will be winning for white. So after rook to b4, the problem for Carlsen is that king to f8 is impossible. King to f8 is impossible because of a beautiful tactical shot, knight to d6. It attacks the rook. Of course, the rook cannot move because you bring a queen into the game. So you have to capture here, but now comes rook check, king has to go back, and now knight to e8 with check. So that's why rook to b4 is really a superhuman move. Well, after rook to b4, the only proper way to continue the position is king to g7, and then after king to f3, the engines give that you have to give up the exchange here, for example with knight captures on c7, and try and hold this. The problem is if you continue playing actively king to f6, then you get rook to c4, and this rook to c4, another superhuman move, saying that okay, this pawn remains here, you will never move your rook and you are not moving anything here. If king f5, trying to shield off the white king from reaching the position, if you do nothing, then the white king will just go up the board and win the game. So you have to shield from that. King e3 now, and again, you don't have many options here. You have to play something g5, captures, and well, it's just a bad position for black. The engines give this as completely winning for white. So the only good variation after rook to b4 would be really king here, king to f3, and now to actually capture this. It's too dangerous of a pawn. Rook c4, captures, and now with knight to d6, try and hold this, or f6 for that matter. It's 3 against 4, rook against the knight, so would the knight be able to hold this? Well, that's a question for the ages, but there was a possibility. So maybe Anand thought about it, maybe he was again very low on time here, maybe he decided that even if he calculated all of that out, maybe he decided that that position was still a draw, who knows, maybe. But yeah, rook to b4, definitely a lot of poison to it. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Ken Thompson, Christopher Gordon, Frank Combs, Salvatore Giambrone, and Christelle Day for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Tata Steel, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world, as there are a few more games that are very exciting from this round that are still being played while I'm recording this, so we'll see what happens there. So yeah, thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Saturday.